Okay, so what I'm trying to do is figure out what's going on here with a batch of 9 millimeter um, Montana Gold jacketed hollow point, 124 grain reloads that I did. These are using the Winchester, or excuse me, Remington 1.5 primers, Winchester plus P nickel plated brass, once fired, and Winchester 231 powder. And this has been loaded on my Dillon 1050. Out of the batch of 100 rounds that I loaded, this many here will actually drop right into the L.E. Wilson case gauge and fit nice and flush with the top of the gauge. There's nothing sticking out up at the top, and they drop right out. I've tested all these; they all work fine in the L.E. Wilson case gauge. This batch, this part of the batch right here, 10 or 12 cartridges, however many that is there, they fit in the gauge, but there's a little protrusion. The base of the case of the cartridge sticks up above the case gauge, and it's, you know, they don't just drop right out very easily. This batch, a bigger number, this part of the batch, a much bigger number, 20 or so cartridges, actually stick way up above the top of the L.E. Wilson case gauge, and if you push them in a little bit, they actually become sort of hard to get out. But as you can see, they do not seat all the way in the L.E. Wilson case gauge. Oddly enough, all of these cartridges will drop right into the Dillon case gauge, which this is a 9 millimeter gauge, and it, you know, my cartridges fit right in and drop right out just like they do in the L.E. Wilson cartridge gauge. In the ones that didn't fit in there also drop right in, or drop in and drop right back out. So it's odd to me that the L.E. Wilson gauge, which is obviously a much more precision gauge than the Dillon gauge, but the Dillon gauge is telling me whether this is a go or a no-go round, and the ones that don't pass the L.E. Wilson gauge test definitely pass the Dillon gauge test. So what's also a little bit odd is that the base diameter on the worst of the case cartridges is at 3.390, 390 thousandths, while the best of my rounds that fit in the L.E. Wilson gauge are at right around 389, 387, 387.5, 388 is about the average that I get out of these. You know, somewhere in the 388, 387 range. So anyway, if you got any tips on why my sizing die or whatever the culprit may be that would allow some of these to be sized really nicely and pass the L.E. Wilson cartridge gauge test, but some of them don't pass that test and are off by a long shot, I'd really like to know your thoughts on that. Thanks a lot.